Welcome. Gio and I are here with some breaking news from Mark Gilbreath, CEO of LiquidSpace. Mark, I think you're definitely a repeat on the podcast, if not a three-peat. Maybe just a repeat.
Will there be like a maroon jacket when I get to 5?
Yes, with some sort of crest on it. Definitely.
If I get to 5? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is 3. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm,
great.
I'm so pleased.
Well, we're pleased.
Well, I think so. Is that 3 including your podcast or 3 in? I don't think it's 3 on just Flex Uncensored. I think he's been on Flex Uncensored, everything co-working, and this is 3. And
Yeah, this has got to be more than 3 if we're counting both.
Oh, well, maybe I have.
I think you got that blazer.
The blazers come in good options. Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, I love having you on the podcast because you always have something exciting to share, some innovation or insight, or today, some news that's pretty exciting for the industry. And we may not reap, mass benefits right away, but it's one of those, you and I were even texting the other day and you said, well, it's, often one step forward, 2 steps back. But this is a big step forward, I think. So I'd love for you to share the news and tell us, what your outlook is and what you think it means for the industry.
Yeah, I think it's like a big bird sized canary in the coal mine. So let's picture that. Big bird, 7 foot tall, giant yellow,
like Macy's parade balloon size,
big old Sesame Street canary in the coal mine. So yeah, the largest enterprise in the world, the federal government, and its real estate division, which is run by the GSA, the General Services Administration, has just done another bold thing. And it's in sort of a sequence of the little steps they've been taking, but it's in some ways a culmination of a few things that have been bubbling in the flex world for the last 4+ years. But about 3 weeks ago, they issued an RFP, request for proposal, for what they titled Enterprise-Wide Marketplace. And in the scope of work for this request for proposal, they described that they were looking for 2 things in particular. They wanted a vendor that could provide a proven marketplace platform that could accommodate, and this is where the novelty is, that could accommodate both the government's own real estate, of which they've got 380 million square feet owned and leased. So they wanted to be able to put some portion of that property that they already have as their office space onto the marketplace to be discoverable, shareable, bookable. And they wanted to interleave with that as they would call it, the commercial co-working world, which we have some history with. And so I guess I'd call that, I think it's bold. I also think it's a canary in the coal mine in the sense that it's an indication of a larger change that's happening, albeit not a bad one. I mean, canary in the coal mine is like, lets you know when you're running out of oxygen, but rather I'd say this is a positive canary. And it reflects, I think, the broader trend that we're seeing more and more examples of amongst larger organizations. We've talked about T-Mobile and Airbnb and Allstate Insurance, and there's a long list of others. But organizations that have looked to reconsider their workplace as more than just leased offices, but a combination of leased office and flex. And most large organizations, now including the GSA, are aggressively pursuing a downsizing of that traditional portion, and then titrating in or factoring in or weaving in more and more use of flexible office in various forms, ranging from space purely on demand, booking a day pass or a meeting room, to flex hubs and combinations of that. And so it's really exciting to see the GSA jump on that bandwagon as well. And I think we can talk about what the implications are for the Flex Uncensored and then the GWA and the co-working sort of community, but it's net, we think it's quite positive. I can elaborate, but I'll take a breath.
Yeah. Gio and I usually fight about who's going to jump in. I'll jump in first then. Mark, you mentioned they're listing, 300, they probably won't list all 380 million square feet is my guess. So some portion of that. Is that atypical for enterprise users on your platform, like the Allstates, the T-Mobiles? Are they usually like managing access to their own real estate separately, but using LiquidSpace for on-demand needs and incremental office space.
Yeah, that's the most natural and the most typical thing.
Yeah.
Allstate sought out a platform, T-Mobile sought out a platform to give them access to space on demand and dedicated as an add to the portfolio they currently had. But what we're starting to see more and more of, and what the GSA in particular is keen on as well, is, gosh, how might I give my employees or our customer, GSA's customer is the employees of the Department of Labor and the Department of Transportation and the USDA and the HUD and like those employees, how might we give them a marketplace styled interface that would let them search, find, and book space that on a given day might be a federal location and on another day might be car workplaces or Lucid or or you name it. One platform that does both those things interleaved. And where in further to that, one platform where they could put controls and policies in place that might allow them to regulate who's allowed to see what spaces and use what spaces and who can spend how much and so on. And so we are fortunate to have built a platform that has those sort of foundational capabilities, and we're delighted that we've been chosen to play an important role in them proving out this concept.
Yeah. And so what does that ultimately look like? Because I saw something today, I guess Upflex announced that they were chosen too, or kind of how many people were chosen? What's the process?
Yeah.
All that fun stuff.
Yesterday, this time we received the definitive word that we have been given an award to be a pilot partner for a pilot that will run as long as 12 months, Gio, and a pilot where and I'll loop back to the second part of your comment and question, but a pilot where GSA is looking to validate as fast as they can, generate data as fast as they can, that sort of two things are working and are true. Actually, maybe three things I might say. Number one, that federal agencies that have excess space that they're willing to share with other agencies are able to do so in a relatively efficient way. So I'm the Department of Energy, and I've got an extra 50,000 square feet in Loveland, Colorado, and I'd like to make that available because we're not using it. And if we can recover some of that cost, great. And then the Department of Transportation. So thing two, that agencies that need space can easily find it amongst other agencies and tap into it, whether that's by the hour or by the day or by the month or longer. So they wanted to validate that ability to create more efficiency within government by sharing. That's a key thing because historically, government worked in a siloed fashion. And the first big innovative thought behind GSA's vision on this was, how might we use marketplace technology to create more sharing and as such more efficiency inside of government? Make more use of less space. Something we've been championing, for a long time. And something that's woven into the kind of the very ethos of a flexible office space or a co-working space. It's shared. The community is a part of a shared experience. The other thing that they want to validate was the ability for them to reach more easily into commercial co-working space when and if they need space in places that they have or need more capacity than they have in a given market. You guys may have seen in recent headlines, a lot of them in government, about how the GSA is pursuing very aggressive goals now in terms of downsizing the federal portfolio. Literally, they're going to cut it in half, which for a 380 million square foot portfolio, that's a lot of space that they're intending to terminate leases on and or buildings they're intending to sell. So as they shrink that leased footprint, like T-Mobile did and like Allstate did, and the expectation, and I'd say the hope and the aspiration for us and the Flex community is that as they shrink that footprint and seek more efficiency and seek more engagement and employees back in offices, perhaps of their choosing, rather than places they're mandated to go, that the rebalancing that will occur over time will, as it has with commercial enterprises, end up with more flex space being used, significantly more. Gio, you mentioned another announcement. I saw it too on LinkedIn this afternoon that Upflex made mention of being chosen. I reached out to GSA. I heard as well a little bit more about that, and I think, and I don't know all the details, and you could reach out to, Christoph or someone on the Upflex team. I'm sure they'll be delighted to talk about it. But I understand that they had partnered with at least one or two other entities to put some proposal forward. And I don't know the identity of all those entities, but I do know I had heard from GSA that they were contemplating multiple awards, and it's clear now that they've done at least two. I think it is just two. I think that this other entity, in fact, its name was UHC, I think they and Upflex have been assigned a given city to do a certain test on, and we'll be doing some other things that I'm not yet at liberty to share the specific details on, but it'll be slightly different. But I think as it relates to our universe, I think it's going to be those two entities that are being tasked with doing complementary but slightly different things from a validation standpoint as part of GSA's overall desire to prove out these concepts.
And Mark, the GSA, you've had an agreement with the GSA. I think we were chatting about this because I was just thinking, wow, 12 weeks is a really quick, process for the government. But there was some plans to make this available. Was it utilized at all, or to a
so this is like the third or the fourth step in a series of actions that I think are all sort of combining in this current moment. In early 2000, before the pandemic, in fact, very early 2000, GSA issued, actually, I think it was December.
2020, you mean?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was like,
December of 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 months before the pandemic hit, GSA issued an RFP for a program that they called FCS, Flexible Coworking Services. And that was, for them, their very first motion or attempt at setting up a procurement vehicle, a contracting structure, and a set of pre-contracted vendors with which the GSA, on behalf of agencies, could procure co-working space when and if needed as an alternative to traditional leasing. And so it created a contracting flow and an RFP process and protocols around pricing and so on. And we, LiquidSpace, along with DeskPass, WeWork, Expansive, and The Yard, those 5 entities, 3 co-working brands and 2 digital platforms, were awarded contracts under that FCS program. So the RFP went out at the end of 2019. It actually didn't get issued until 2021 due to pandemic delays. And it was put out with an estimated spend level of $50 million. And it has not achieved that yet for, I think, a number of reasons, some structural and inertia-based and even policy. And even Congress was sort of a complicating factor in terms of getting in the way of this change. But that program, which, Jamie, you've met the person that authored that, Chuck Hardy, who's the Chief Workplace Officer at GSA, who you had the opportunity to spend a little time with, along with us. It was his inspiration. And so consider that step one. That was, government trying to get familiar with co-working and all that it could offer and start to create a lane or a pathway through which it could, become of service to government. That was step one. Last year, another relevant thing happened. The GSA internally began on a path that culminated in them creating 6 internal private co-working locations across government, where they tapped into existing space that they had that was underutilized or unutilized, and they created a shared environment and made it available to federal personnel. And so this was another experiment for them, trying to wrap their hands around what the operational requirements would be of running a space and providing hospitality, and also try to validate whether that might be a means of serving federal needs and using space more efficiently. Then more recently, about 6 or 8 weeks ago, the GSA somewhat quietly issued a press release and mentioned a new program that they had announced within government called Space Match. And the press release, which you can find listed online if you Google it, or on the sam.gov website, but Space Match, as they described it in the press release, was a program GSA would try to assist agencies, federal customers, with either sharing or tapping into space. So sort of, again, going at this opportunity, how might we leverage the federal portfolio more efficiently? And Space Match, I would sort of describe as a marketplace motion in principle, but it was one where they basically said, hey, if anybody's got space that they'd be willing to share, contact us here. Hey, if anybody needs space, we might have some that we could direct you to. Contact here.
Quick
and so
email-based
yeah,
matchmaking.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, and GSA had I'm speaking on their behalf, but and I may get some of this wrong, but I think their intent was clear and admirable. Hey, we might be an agent to help drive some efficiency. What then happened 3 weeks ago really draws on all three of those elements when they published this RFP and said, listen, we want a digital platform that can be an enterprise marketplace that can integrate internal space, whether it's an internal co-working space or a whole floor or a whole building that is able to be shared, and also can let people search and access that space, and also bring in the co-working space that we've had as a side purchasing program, bring it all together. It gets, where I think the sum of all of those parts brought together in, frankly, a proven technology-based sort of modality, a marketplace. And, we've been doing this for 15 years. I think it has the absolute opportunity to be a, 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 type hit. Whereas those individual pieces by themselves, they learn little things. But I think, I know from, conversations with the officials at GSA that drove this, that they want this to be a hit. They think it's going to be a hit. And looping back to your question, Gio, the purpose of this pilot period is for them to demonstrate and validate with data that it's working, that people will list space, people will find space, co-working space can be booked as well. And so for our sort of shared audience, you and us here at LiquidSpace, and back to the canary in the coal mine sort of positive spin, another big enterprise is jumping onto the bandwagon and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And they want to figure it out. They want to consume more flex. They want to be able to find it. They want to be able to use it. They want to be able to bring it into their mix. They want to use less inefficient space. They want to use more efficient and well-located space. This is, they've got the vision now. And now, we, the collective we, our thousands of venue partners and our team and the others that we're working with, our job is to help them down that path. And if and when they stumble, pick them back up and stay focused on sort of the true north vision that they have, which is a much more efficient workplace, and one that also better serves the federal employees that are being asked to come back to the office more often.
So, Mark, you and I had kind of chatted a little bit about this is probably not the immediate opening of the floodgates with, government employees running into the front door of the nearest co-working space on Monday morning. That may be a few steps down the road. The exciting kind of macro behavior is the right sizing of the portfolio, the embracing of flexibility, and I would bet, I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet sort of the voting with the feet down the road. But for now, probably the government space will get some sort of priority on the platform, and co-working space will be a little bit secondary, but that may shift over time. And I would guess, maybe the co-working spaces are nicer than the government office space. And so is there kind of a shakeout of people voting with their feet and choosing when they're able to, something closer to home or, well-appointed and serviced? And
well, one of the new high-ranking officials within the GSA world is the new commissioner of the Public Building Service, a gentleman named Michael Peters. So I think he's 2 months new in the job, but the PBS, or the Public Building Service, is the organization within GSA that owns and operates the federal portfolio. So they're the ones that execute leasing and also own and maintain buildings. And Mr. Peters is new to that job, but one of the things he quickly learned or inherited, one of the challenges to overcome that he inherited, is that by all estimation, that federal portfolio was larger than it needed to be, but also one of the liabilities, or one of the debts that had accumulated, is a lot of those federal assets had deferred maintenance, had substantial amounts of deferred maintenance, to the extent.
Surprise.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gio.
I was just saying, surprised that it's got deferred maintenance.
And so, in some cases, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars that would be necessary to bring these properties back up to kind of compliance or usability. And Michael Peters, in an announcement that he made early in his tenure, I think about a month ago, he put up, there was coverage of an announcement that he made internally to GSA where he spoke about this, and we're going to cut by 50% the portfolio. And we're going to acquire and evolve toward newer, nicer, contemporary, exciting space. We want to up level. And so I think the opportunity for the flex world is to be part of that up leveling. And I think our duty is to help further GSA's education on all of the virtues of using flexible office, whether it's a hub for 300 employees on a 2-year agreement, or whether it's, dropping into a space on the go for a day. And we know that those use cases are prevalent now. They're proven. And so, but even for the most progressive of organizations, there's some new behavior in that. There's a new mindset you got to bring on. And so I think this pilot and the activities that follow will be about them getting used to and comfortable and confident and frankly excited about the outcome. Because we know what the outcome can look like.
Mm-hmm.
It can look like extraordinary cost reductions. I mean, T-Mobile and AT&T and Allstate both have declared publicly how their ROI has been to the tune of 70 or 80%. So for a government that's looking for cost savings right now, this is going to be, I think, really attractive. But it also repeatedly shows higher engagement and sentiment and enthusiasm amongst the employees that are given that option as well.
Yep.
And in a world where like return to office seems to be having its sort of like second moment, I think we've got the opportunity for it to be returned to many offices, not return to the office we left behind. It looks like shit, 5 years.
Yeah. Well, and this is, not necessarily a benefit to co-working, but I'm thinking, the government employees are probably largely commuting to DC, to the major cities, I would guess. The return to office mandate, government workers may not necessarily live very close to the office. So quality of life, good for the environment, lower emissions, productivity, like lots of arguments being made for kind of right sizing and right locating those offices.
And while when you and I had a brief chat yesterday, I sort of cautioned and said, hey, listen, let's not whip everybody up into a fraud, this tidal wave of demand. That said, I was having a conversation with a GSA official just this morning about one particular agency that's waiting to jump in on this new program and I won't name them, but they need space for 1 or 2 people in 300 locations. So how do you solve for that with traditional leasing? You don't.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite likely we're going to find an abundance of use cases that are more naturally suited for flexible office, co-working, and flex in all of its forms, as a complement to a traditional portfolio within the government that's going to become more efficient and right-sized and refreshed. And I hope we find that, next month.
Yeah.
When we launch. I hope it's a flood. That'd be great, because I know that our partners are ready to fulfill that. Yeah. And that'll be exciting.
Mark, while I have you, I could just sort of vividly picture the, one of the charts that you showed at the GWA conference in Phoenix, which really demonstrated like on demand is the demand sort of post COVID, and that's really sort of the hockey stick growth. Is that still the case?
On demand is still growing very nicely. We're starting to see, and it's very welcomed, affirming in a growth in team spaces, dedicated space, hub space, without question. That's coming back. And if you'll allow me a little product plug, one of the requirements in the GSA RFP, so I described at length sort of the marketplace aspect. I neglected to talk about the other piece that was in the RFP scope of work, which was AI augmented portfolio management tools to help, I'm paraphrasing, to help government analyze its portfolio. And it just so happens we have a new solution out called Portfolio Manager AI. And it is a tool that was inspired by the vast amount of data that we have in our marketplace of 2 types. We've got cost data from the thousands of partners around the world. So we've got a very good, if not the best point of view and data-driven point of view on what's a 4-person meeting room in Minneapolis cost on a Thursday, or what's a 50-person team space in the East Village in New York cost, for 12 months. Like, we have a data-driven answer to those types of questions. We also have undeniably the largest transactional behavioral data set, because we're the first and the oldest platform with the largest network base and the largest customer base. We've had the most transactions. And so that behavioral data is exclusive. Jamie, if you were the vice president of corporate real estate at Coca-Cola and you said, Mark, I'm intrigued about Flex, but I really need to understand what I should expect if we leaned into a program like this. We're Coca-Cola, we're big. If we put 1,000 people in, what could we expect? Well, we could tell you what you should expect, what you could reasonably expect in terms of adoption and engagement, the types of spaces people would book, the frequency with which they'd book, and we know the cost data as well. So we have a new solution out now that is designed to leverage those unique data sets that we have and provide dynamic and AI enhanced scenario modeling that can allow you to model a existing leased location and consider what various flex scenarios might look like cost wise, or model an existing flex scenario like the use of on-demand space and consider whether a hub is needed. So that tool, which is a part of why GSA chose us for the piece that we'll be helping them validate, is also now helping fuel our ability to help larger enterprises in particular make smart decisions around dedicated spaces, team spaces, the big juicier locations that frankly have been sort of in a winter for the last 4 months.
Yeah.
Curious what you guys are seeing and hearing from your vast reach. Anything, does that resonate? Does that recovery of dedicated, are you seeing that at all as well?
Yeah. So the interesting part is, like, today we had a webinar today with Michelle Pennerondo with PON. And so we had a chance to talk about her confidential company A, as we called it on the webinar, and there, several hundred locations across the US that they had to put in. But at the same time, I don't know if you saw, but there was a webinar earlier today that had the heads of enterprise or occupier services for JLL, CBRE, Cushman, and the fourth another one of the other big ones. And it was so interesting because that was the conversation around enterprise and their commitment and overall future growth of Flex, right? And so part of the reason I say that is there's opportunities with your AI platform for enterprise, just same as the government's looking at it, but anyone to evaluate what their portfolio is and what their needs are. And so, Jamie Hadari, one of his points was like, look, if there's an enterprise that had 70 locations across the country or across the globe, their focus should be on the top, 10 to 20 locations, right? And building, and those are the bigger ones, the hubs, right? And building culture there. And let the co-working / flex operators focus on the remainder of the portfolio and building culture within. That's just going to continue to be really interesting how that plays out.
Yeah, I agree. I need to find that webinar link if it was recorded.
Oh yes, for context,
I'll forward it to you.
Means it was an Ask Me Anything hosted by the GWA for GWA members. Is that correct, Giovanni?
No, there was another webinar that was.
Oh,
that
the
was
Jamie Hodari one.
Anything.
Sorry. Yes, 2 webinars. Yes.
I'll forward it to you right now, but it was called Industry Insights, Reflections of the Past, Envisioning the Future. And like I said, it had, let's see if it shows me who the name, because you're going to probably know some of these names. Oh, no, it doesn't have everyone's name on it. But yeah, super interesting just to hear from real estate service providers of that size, right? And we all know the CBRE Industrious investment, and then, their Jamie's new role over there. So I think we're just going to continue to see more and more of this.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree.
Mark, I'm curious, I'm sort of circling back to the GSA process because the AI conversation got me thinking, I mean, this is a real journey they're on, and it's a big experiment, we hope, and we hope they learn and they'll have lots of findings and that they could input into the model to help them make decisions about where to go and what to do. But also it's a really big project for them. Have they told you how they're going to support this internally? Sort of change management efforts and, communicating to people who can actually use this? I mean, will it be sort of mandated or any insights into how the rollout will look?
A good number of insights. We're now contracted. There's a lot of conversations unfolding as we speak. And I think some of the questions you've asked about will become public in, short order, or we'll be able to talk about. What I can say now is they are moving at an extraordinary pace for government, or for enterprise for that matter. They are highly motivated, and there's real urgency and need for them to stand up some of these capabilities that we've been talking about here this half hour, because they have already begun the downsizing of portfolio. They've already begun the rollout of mandates for people to come back. They're already encountering hotspot situations. And so, they're hoping that these pilot experiments are the blueprint for the future, and they don't have the luxury of waiting.
Yeah.
And so, we'll be launching what I've described to you in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Which is exciting, but insane.
Yeah, right. The good news is it's happening and really fast. The bad news is it's happening and really fast. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to give us a lot of heartburn in terms of readiness, because the platform's real, it's scale proven. But for GSA, it's going to be a big swing. And so there's a lot of personnel that are on the team and excited about it.
Good. But right, to your point, I mean, that means it's really happening. Their little kind of very small incremental moves in the past are now going to be a bigger leap.
Yeah, that's the outcome they want.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Anything else you'd share about this that we haven't asked about that we should have?
I guess to the thousands of partners of ours across North America, we'll know more relatively soon about the potential or likely sort of hot spots, hot regions of need. But to be sure, your presence in our marketplace, your listings, their completeness, the depth of them, it's useful. It's more important now than ever. So you want to get a jump on the game and, add that new location that you hadn't yet listed, or add those 5 other meeting rooms you hadn't shown before, or get those team suites back up. I think, it's not a bad time for some spring cleaning and setting yourself up for success. And of course, anybody can reach out to me directly, Mark at LiquidSpace, if they've got specific questions about what it might mean to them as an operator. I'm happy to share as much as I can at the moment.
Awesome. I love it. Gio, any parting words?
No, I'm just excited to hear more about as it comes out, as it plays out for you and Upflex and just everything in general. I think it's, just today, there's been so much momentum moving forward on the industry, just as news keep coming out, the webinars and just so much positive stuff. And so I'm excited to continue to hear that and participate in that.
Thanks, pal.
Love it. And Mark, we'll look forward to seeing your team in Boston almost next week and a half, couple of weeks. Yeah.
I'm crossing my fingers that I might make it there. If so, I'll give the both of you a hug. So
totally looking forward to it. Well, thanks for hopping on and sharing the good news. And it's always exciting to get the insights on some forward motion in the industry. So thanks for making the time, Mark.
My great pleasure. Cheers.